Let's get into this tax proposal because we don't know what Manchin's doing at this point. And, you know, it was reported, I don't know, a day ago that he was okay with this. And then I think...
And it was a hallelujah moment because Sinema says no increase on corporate tax rates, no increase on highest marginal rates. But I could get on board with this billionaire tax that she was working on the side with Elizabeth Warren on. And then right before the show breaks, Manchin says to Punchbowl, or they're reporting it, I don't want the billionaire tax either.
Well, and let's be clear here. There's two sets of taxes that we're talking about. One is this billionaire tax. We'll get into that in a moment. And then the second is essentially the functional equivalent of an alternative minimum tax for corporations, which basically says, and let's start with the corporate minimum tax. There would be a 15%, and the real story with corporate taxes in this country has always been the effective rate. Whatever the tax rate is, it doesn't matter if the corporations have figured out some mechanism in which to evade taxes.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's a 30% corporate tax rate or a 5% corporate tax rate. If the corporations have figured out the mechanisms in which to avoid all taxes, it doesn't matter. This would basically do away with that problem. It would require some U.S. companies that report more than $1 billion in profits to shareholders, to pay at least a 15% tax rate, or I should say tax, period. Doesn't matter how many tax breaks they qualify for. And the way that they would assess those profits would be easy. There's a shareholders report that you've got to issue. So there's this game of like, shareholders, we made $10 billion last year, or $3 billion per quarter, whatever it is. But then when it comes to the government, it's like, well, we didn't really make these profits because we were offsetting them with this depreciation or that tax break or whatnot. That would all go away.
And that would apply to around 200 companies that currently are circumventing that system.
And supposedly that would raise $300 to $400 billion over 10 years. So 30, which it's not nothing. The idea is that it would simplify the tax rates. It would get rid of that dynamic where they're not paying enough taxes, where they're not paying any taxes, and it raises some money in the context of the bill. This is also a change in the way that the tax code is structured, because it's no longer we're going to pretend to tax you and then you come up with ways of getting around that tax. Totally. This is just going to be a very straightforward type of situation. You like to brag about your profits, of course, because that's what increases your stock value.
I do. Yeah, you're right.
And as you know, your pay is tied to the stock value, so you have an incentive to report those profits and not underreport them.
It was written into my contract.
I mean, here's the irony: is that if these corporations actually were functioning in such a way that the most prominent issue for them was the long-term financial health of their corporations, maybe we'd be afraid they're underreport their profits. But that's never the way they operate, because it's all about the value of their stocks, because all of the C-suite and the CEOs and the board of directors, they all get their pay, their compensation through the stocks.
Yes.
So this would be a big shift. And I guess because the rate stays at 21%, the corporate tax rate, Kristen Sinema is happy.
Yeah. And it also pairs with what the Biden administration was pushing and their initiative on the global minimum tax rate. So
exactly.
You're able to kind of have two layers to the wall. You can't go below this 15% rate. And it's enforced in two separate ways.
All right. So that takes us to the Wyden Billionaires Tax. And it is
It's a lot more robust, and as I mentioned, than initially reported, which is encouraging.
I think people who've been listening to the program for any number of time know that my perspective on taxation is that the biggest role it plays in our system is to inhibit people owning too much money, so that we do not have a wealth disparity that also turns into a political disparity in terms of power. Now, that's already happened. We have a plutonomy that has turned into a plutocracy. We do not really technically need taxes to fund the government. We print our own money in this country, and we have a currency that is accepted worldwide, and we have the ability to fund what we want to fund. Taxes are helpful in the event that you do overheat the economy. You can pull back and basically pursue austerity at moments where you need to inhibit the purchasing power of society at any given point. So taxes also function in that way. Now, in the way that Washington exists today, taxes also are a method of raising money to spend, which is a way for the wealthy people in this country to inhibit what government does for the vast majority of people.
And so then you hear that in the form of pay-fors, right? And
yes.
That's so the conversation we're having is, one, you're absolutely right. Like, we don't need to even be engaging in this, but regardless, Washington wants to engage in it altogether.
And the vast majority of Americans also perceive it this way, too.
Yes, they perceive it this way because it's reinforced constantly. And Biden says the bill will be fully paid for, the bill will be fully paid for, right? But at the same time, Sinema and Manchin, or Sinema at least, no increase in corporate taxes, no increase in the highest marginal tax rate, which means, okay, then if the bill needs to be fully paid for, we are at an impasse. And then it is that logjam that inhibits social spending. And so it's like a built-in excuse in the system.
Exactly.
We can't do this for you. Okay, we could blow the whole thing up and do away with this fiction, but no one's willing to do that, even someone like Bernie, just yet.
I mean, this is the tool that they use. We can't afford this. We need to tighten our belt. We all need to make hard decisions. I mean, the rhetoric changes depending on the context. This is the reason why we need to cut Social Security. This is the reason why we need to cut this. The reason why I cut that, because nobody wants to raise taxes, and so they have to pretend that we actually need to raise taxes to do this. The reason why you have taxes is to inhibit people from having a monopoly over money and some type of concentration of power and of wealth. But so with that said, This is I mean, I like this a lot. This is, I think, one of the most exciting sort of developments from a tax perspective in doing that. What this bill, I don't know if it's really quite a bill, this proposal would do from Ron Wyden, it would tax billionaires, and I think it would only apply to like 700 billionaires. That number obviously is not fixed. It just so happens how many billions of dollars you have. It taxes billionaires on their unrealized capital income. So in other words, what billionaires do is, I own 1 billion shares of Amazon, let's just say. And I'm just making these numbers up because I don't know what the Amazon stock price is, but I imagine it's quite high. And I don't know how many outstanding shares are, but I would imagine there's quite a few. All right, but I own 1 million Amazon shares, and they're at an X number of price. And so they're worth, let's just say, $10 billion. Now, as that goes up, the value of the Amazon shares go up. Maybe it's gone from $8 billion to $10 billion, and it can go up to $12 billion. I don't have to pay taxes on that because I have not realized, what they say, the gains from that increase.
Yes.
I haven't sold the stock, and so I don't actually have the cash. But $8 billion, $10 billion, $4 billion, $1 billion worth of Amazon stock allows me to go out and borrow the money. And I get really good rates because I'm a billionaire. And believe me, like, I don't know any billionaires, but I know some people who are like, wealthy. And they get much better rates on all this stuff. And they're not even that wealthy.
Right.
And so I go out and I borrow the money. I want to build a spaceship and go to space. So I'm going to borrow the money against my stock. I don't have to pay taxes on that money that I borrowed. In fact, I probably get a tax break, maybe on the interest, depending on what I use it for. And that's what billionaires do to avoid taxes until essentially they die. And what this would do is simply say, okay, your stock went from $8 billion to $10 billion. We're going to tax that $2 billion gain.
We are taxing the increase in capital gains.
It's what is known as the unrealized capital income. It exists out there. It has more value. You can get loans against it.
And it's nothing outrageous for you billionaires. It's 23.8% as proposed by Wyden. And it could get whittled down maybe to, throw something over to Manchin.
Now, if your stock goes from 8 billion to 6 billion, well, then you have losses and you can use those losses against any other gains you have in other places. So it's perfectly fair. Also, what this would do is it would institute a minimum tax on the profits large corporations tout to their shareholders. We said that already. It also taxes companies that buy back their own stock. If you go back into interviews that we've done, and we haven't had him on in a while, he's a Lazonic. It's Bill Lazonic. You can look him up, William Lazonic. We've had him on this program a couple of times. He's a professor, I think, at UMass Business. And his theory has been that stock buybacks, which incidentally were illegal.
They should still be illegal.
Up until
yes.
1980, I think it was or 81, when Ronald Reagan basically told the SEC, let's make that legal now. Prior to that, it was like a pump, and not necessarily dump scheme. Yeah. Like if you buy your own stock, it increases the value of the stock. It's stock manipulation. And what happened is that when Ronald Reagan allowed for this to be legal, you started having companies who, instead of putting their money back into their company, instead of like maintaining a workforce, instead of maintaining a responsibility to the community, found the CEO of this corporation, and you're on the board of directors, and we both own a ton of stock in the majority report. I'm like, you know what? Bradley, we don't need any more. Matt, you're going to take over Bradley's job. We're going to save some money. I'm going to take that money and I'm going to buy our own stock. And then guess what happens? You and I who get compensated through our stock purchases, we make more money. We have a little cottage industry.
The stock value increases, and thus we all get richer. And I mean, the idea that this is legal, because it is now incredibly commonplace. It's like as easy as breathing, and it's so common sense. Like, I remember a few years back, Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders did an op-ed in the New York Times, basically calling
the end of yes.
Yes, I mean this is like a way to cheat the system, and yet it's become so normalized.
I personally would like to get rid of it totally, but at the very least, there's going to be taxing that will at least disincentivize it a little bit.
Well, we hope.
We hope.
Yes.
These are all proposals, incidentally. There's also a 3.8% net investment tax from the Affordable Care Act to partnerships and S corporations who got a big benefit from the Trump tax cuts. And so these are essentially, ultimately what you're getting is less taxes on the rich, not less taxes, an absence of increase in taxes on the rich, but much more significant taxes on the ultra rich, which is, I think, a pretty good start. If these were separate, like I say, if these tax bills were separate from the reconciliation bill, people would be pretty psyched, I think. And, you know, there's specifics in it. You are eligible for this new tax if you have $1 billion in assets or $100 million in income for 3 straight years.
Pretty protected class.
Now, I know this is going to be rough, folks. And for me, if there's, you know, I don't know that there's going to be capital flight because of this. But God bless.
Fine.
Bye-bye.
Something either in the art, maybe it was the Times article that we read in the packet before, 3/4 of capital income goes unreported.
Of course.
Isn't that
of course.
unbelievable?
And
3/4, I should say.
And let's be clear on how this is going to work. It's very easy to say, like, okay, you had $8 billion worth of Amazon stock, and now it's $10 billion, $2 billion. That's your unrealized capital gain. We're going to tax that. And you get 23.8% tax, and it's a mark to market. So at the end of the year, we assess how far it's gone up, and that's where we apply the tax. Now, there is... for people who already are in that sort of like cohort, there is a one-time tax on the built-in gain at the time of the enactment. So in other words, if I had $4 billion worth of Amazon stock and I bought that, or I've had it over the course of 20 years or whatever it is, and now it's worth $6 billion, the tax would be retroactive and you'd get 5 years to pay it off. As if you needed the 5 years, but let's just, you know, we want to be nice. And so that's what, like, you know, a Jeff Bezos would do. You'd have to do that. Now, then it's also, there are some assets that are a little bit harder to tell what they are. Assets that aren't as easily tradable. And what they do in that instance is, you do not get taxed on that until you do sell it. But there's an interest payment. So the tax is actually higher because you've deferred that tax, but you still will pay the full tax plus interest.
So apparently Bezos would owe $40 billion today if this was implemented. So, and if he chooses to offset it or pay it out over increments, it would increase in interest.
And I don't know what that would put his wealth at.
I just looked it up. It's like, I mean, his net worth is $200 billion.
The difference between having $200 billion and $160 billion, or even if I would imagine the difference between having $200 billion versus like $50 billion is nothing. I mean, there's just, it's nothing. Maybe you have one less space program, or maybe you can't compete with governments on certain things.
Yeah, and you're unable to feed the insatiable beast that is his sociopathy.
Well, it would take a couple of therapy sessions. I'm sure you'd get back there.
Maybe if he can afford it after this new capital gains tax.
There is apparently, Mitt Romney said, like, well, since this is not tradable, I'm sorry, I said not tradable in terms of assets, like real estate or something like that, it's tradable, but it's just not as fluid. Like, right. How do you measure? If you have a mansion that's worth $10 million, and how do you measure how much it's worth in a year unless you sell it? you can't look on Zillow and get the exact, value of it or whatever it is. So that's the one that would defer. But there are some non-tradable assets, I guess. And like some, apparently someone has floated something like this. Maybe Mitt Romney has.
Paintings?
Paintings. Yeah. Did we have a clip from Romney?
Yesterday.
Did we play that yesterday?
Yes.
Or did we actually, we didn't play that one, did we?
We did.
And yeah, so Romney said that yesterday. The idea that Bezos and whatever it is, Elon Musk or whoever, one of these idiots are.
Elon Musk, I think, made over $30 billion yesterday. Anyway. Are
going to sell their stock in their companies to invest in paintings and in diamonds or something like that. First off, I don't think there is enough of that stuff around. And they wouldn't do that, I think, because it would destroy their wealth. Yeah. Because, like, let's say they're like, we're going to buy up all of the Picassos.
Yeah.
And make them incredibly expensive. There's not enough people around to buy them from them. I mean, that's the thing. It's like Jeff Bezos can sell one share of Amazon stock. And there is a lot of buyers out there for that one share of Amazon stock. He can sell these in increments. But if he was to do paintings or diamonds, they would basically be burning their money.
I know. It's like, what Bond villain rich person is Mitt Romney like trying to pretend is going to be affected by this or get away with something? Well, it's just so silly.
They wouldn't do it. And frankly, if they did, like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm perfectly willing to have Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk tie up all of their fortune in super expensive paintings and in diamonds.
Bars of gold.
Yeah, because, well, no, not gold, because gold you can actually cut up and I want stuff that they are locked into. The only way that you're going to get your money out of this is if you find somebody else who can spend $12 billion on a Monet. And good. Then they're done.
Yeah.
And so this is a great proposal. And, well,
I don't think so,
says Joe Manchin.
You're right.
It's divisive. He's the one guy who can spot that.
But who knows? I mean, his word is not worth the paper it's written on or like the spittle that comes out of his mouth when he says it. He can maybe be coaxed or changed.
Can you ever just believe, God, man.
What?
I just like the idea of like protecting the billionaires' wealth like that is just, to me, it's just, it's psychotic.
Right. But I mean,
but that's who he hangs out with and stuff.
Yeah. On his yacht. And also, again, it doesn't even become about like the substance of it at a certain point. It's like a personal thing. You read these reports of Manchin angrily like screaming at Bernie, how about none of it? Like, it's personal for this dude.
Yeah.
He wants to be the kingpin. And, you know, it's all office politics, except millions and millions and millions of people are going to be affected.
But like with cinema, like whenever it's personal, it's always personal in a way that serves the whole.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.